Mabel Pines has been smiling since the first second you met her. Not politely, not the careful, dimmed-down smile that people learn to wear as they get older, but full force, braces and all, glitter somewhere on her person. The smile of someone who has decided the world is fundamentally good and is quietly daring it to prove otherwise. Most people file her under comic relief. The pig, the sweaters, the boy craziness, the grappling hook. And in doing that, they miss the thing that gets me every time I sit with this show, which is that the loud, sparkly, ridiculous twin is actually carrying the single heaviest idea Gravity Falls ever tries to hold. There is a whole philosophy inside her, a real and coherent one, and it gets tested almost to destruction before the summer is over. Tonight we are going through all of it. The optimism, the fear underneath it, the night her worldview helped end the world, and the choice at the end that finally grew her up. So get comfortable, turn the lights down low, and if you have not subscribed to Pine Hat yet, it really helps us keep making these. Let me start with who she actually is, because the philosophy only makes sense once you see the person clearly, and the series goes out of its way to make sure you almost do not. Mabel Pines is one half of a set of 12-year-old twins who are sent to spend the summer of 2012 in a small, strange town called Gravity Falls, Oregon, staying with their great-uncle in a tourist trap called the Mystery Shack. Her brother is Dipper. He is the one with the notebook and the theories and the constant, low-grade anxiety about whether he is doing everything right. She is the one who arrives at the same weird town and decides, more or less on day one, that she is going to have the best summer of her life, whether the universe cooperates or not. Same bus, same destination, same uncle, two completely different operating systems. And here is the first thing people get wrong about her. The thing the show's own creator felt he had to correct out loud. Mabel is not the dumb twin. Alex Hirsch, who made the series, put it about as bluntly as you can. He said Mabel is not stupid, she is a ham, and there is a big difference. That distinction matters more than it sounds, because a ham is not a person who fails to understand the room. A ham is a person who understands the room perfectly and chooses to be huge inside it anyway. The braces and the sweaters and the songs are not evidence of a girl who does not get it. They are the deliberate output of a girl who gets it completely and has decided that being embarrassing on purpose, in the service of joy, is a legitimate way to live. She reads people more fluently than almost anyone else in the room. Over and over, when the plot ties itself into a knot that logic cannot untie, it is Mabel who solves it. Because the knot turns out to be a feeling, and feelings are her native language. She is voiced by Kristen Schaal, and Hirsch has said he always pictured Schaal in the role, which you can hear in every line, that particular blend of sweetness and unhinged energy that makes Mabel sound like she might burst into a song or into tears with equal likelihood. But the detail I find genuinely lovely is where the character comes from. Mabel is based on Alex Hirsch's real twin sister, Ariel. Dipper is based on Alex. The whole show is a kind of loving monument to their actual childhood summers, which means that when you watch these two 12-year-olds bicker and protect each other and slowly realize their childhood is ending, you are watching a grown man draw his own sister back into being 12, keeping her exactly as she was for one more summer, before real life did what real life does to everybody. There is something almost unbearably tender about that once you know it, and it quietly colors everything Mabel does. She is not just a character. She is a person somebody did not want to grow up, either. Then there are the surfaces, the things you notice first. The hand-knit sweaters, a different one nearly every episode, each with its own little design, a shooting star, a llama, a rainbow, a shattering glass. She makes them herself. That is not a small thing. In a world of characters who are handed their look by a costume department, Mabel is a girl who literally manufactures her own identity by hand, stitch by stitch, and wears a new self-portrait every single day. The braces, the boy craziness that drives half of season 1, the arts and crafts, the glitter, the grappling hook she asks for and treasures, and Waddles, the pig she wins at the fair, who becomes maybe the purest expression of who she is. She wanted him instantly, completely, no cost-benefit analysis, and she never once wavers about it. When Mabel loves something, she loves it at full volume and without hedging. And Waddles is the softest, roundest proof of that on the whole show. One more fact, and it is my favorite, because of how much people get it wrong. Mabel is the older twin, by 5 minutes. That comes from Hirsch himself, rather than from a line in an episode, so I want to be honest that it lives in creator statements more than on-screen canon, but it is well attested, and it recasts a lot if you let it. Everybody assumes Dipper is the older one, because Dipper acts older, worries like the older one, carries himself like the responsible sibling. But he is not. The anxious, careful, list-making brother is the little brother, and the loud, sparkly, apparently careless sister is the big sister, the firstborn, the one who came into the world first and, in her own chaotic way, has been looking out for him ever since. There is even a running joke where she tells him she will explain something when he is older, needling him with those 5 minutes. Hold on to that, because when we get to the end of the summer, when everything comes down to whether Mabel can protect her little brother or let him go, the fact that she has been the older twin this whole time is going to land very differently than it did at the start. So that is the person, an optimist, a ham, an artist, a big sister, based on a real girl, a real brother loved enough to freeze in time. Now let me tell you what she actually believes, because underneath all the glitter there is a creed, and it is more rigorous than it looks. The first plank of it, the one everything else is built on, is optimism. And I want to be careful with that word, because optimism gets used lazily, as if it just meant being cheerful, being the person who says things will be fine. That is not what Mabel does. What Mabel does is closer to a decision, a standing policy about how to meet reality, and the series describes it with the oldest metaphor there is. She is the glass-half-full twin. She goes into almost every situation expecting the best of the people in it, and hoping the adventure plays out the way she wants. Now, on paper that sounds like a recipe for constant disappointment, and this is the thing that makes her interesting rather than naive. She keeps doing it anyway. She is disappointed, regularly. Boys turn out to be made of gnomes. Plans collapse. The summer refuses to be perfect. And the next morning, she is back at full brightness, betting on the good outcome again, as if the previous loss simply did not count as evidence. That is not stupidity. That is a worldview with a very deliberate blind spot, and the blind spot is chosen. She has decided that a life spent bracing for the worst is not worth living even if it is more accurate, and she would rather be wrong and hopeful than right and hollow. Watch how this actually functions next to her brother, because that is where you see it is doing real work and not just decorating the character. Dipper is the pragmatist. When a situation looks lost, Dipper's instinct is to calculate the odds, note that they are bad, and start preparing for failure. That is a completely reasonable way to be, and it is also the way that gets a person stuck, because there are moments, and Gravity Falls is full of them, where the only path forward runs directly through a bad odds bet, where the correct move is to try the thing that probably will not work, because trying it is the only thing that could possibly work. And in those moments, it is Mabel's irrational hope that carries the two of them across. When Dipper is ready to give up, she stays positive, and her staying positive is not empty noise. It is the fuel that keeps them moving long enough for a solution to appear. The show is making a quiet argument here that I think is deeply wise. It is saying that pure logic, left alone, has a failure mode, and the failure mode is despair. Logic can talk you out of the one thing that would have saved you. Hope is the correction. Hope is what keeps the door open long enough to find out you were wrong to be afraid. The second plank, and this is the one that actually holds her together, is love. There is a way of describing Mabel that I keep coming back to, that everything Mabel does, she does out of love. And when you go back through the series with that as your lens, it is startling how completely it holds up. Her boy craziness, which is easy to laugh at, is not shallow. It is a 12-year-old with an enormous capacity for affection and nowhere yet to put it, so it spills everywhere, onto boys, onto her pig, onto her friends, onto strangers she has decided are wonderful. Her arts and crafts are love made physical, objects manufactured purely so she can give them to people. Her loyalty to Dipper is total and instinctive. When you understand that love is the engine, the parts of her that look like chaos suddenly organize themselves into something coherent. She is not random. She is a person running every single decision through one question, which is roughly, what would be the kindest thing to do here? And then doing that, immediately, without a second draft. This is why she values what she values. Mabel cares about genuine relationships and real experiences far more than she cares about how anything looks from the outside. She has almost no interest in status. She wants closeness, she wants fun, she wants the people she loves to be happy and near her, and everything else is negotiable. In a show that is partly about a con man great-uncle who has built his whole life on appearances and fakery, Mabel is the pole of pure authenticity. She could not run a con if her life depended on it. And in fact, there is an episode where she tries to run the Mystery Shack her own way, and it nearly falls apart precisely because she cannot bring herself to manipulate anybody. Her sincerity is not a weakness she has failed to outgrow. It is a principle. She would rather lose honestly than win by pretending, and she holds that line even when it costs her. People who write about her from a psychology angle tend to reach for the same set of labels, and I will pass them along with the warning that they come from fan analysis and personality blogs, rather than from anything official, so hold them loosely. They tend to call her an ENFP, the classic, warm, spontaneous, people-loving type. They describe her as extremely high in openness to experience, which is the trait that makes a person curious, imaginative, and drawn to novelty, and you can see that in her willingness to embrace the weird town rather than fear it. They call her high in agreeableness, which is the warmth and the trust and the wanting everyone to get along. Moderate on the conscientiousness scale, which is a polite way of saying she is not exactly organized. And notably low on neuroticism, low on the anxiety and the negative emotion that dominate her brother's inner weather. The way she handles stress, they say, is through humor, creativity, and reaching for other people, and her optimism works as a kind of buffer against the world's blows. I find that framing useful, mostly because it lines up so neatly with what the series shows you. She meets pain by making something, by making a joke, or by grabbing hold of someone she loves, and those three moves are more or less her entire toolkit for surviving being alive. So put the two planks together, and you have the creed. Expect the best, and act out of love. Bet on the good outcome, and pour yourself into the people around you without holding anything back. It is a bright, generous, slightly reckless way to move through the world, and for the first stretch of the series it works beautifully, because the stakes are small enough that the worst case is just an embarrassing afternoon. But a philosophy is only really a philosophy once it has been tested, once the world pushes back hard enough to find out whether it holds, and this one has a crack running through the middle of it that will not show until the pressure comes. Because a person who cannot stand to lose the people she loves, who runs everything on the fear that the good thing will end, is carrying a fault line right under the foundation, and the whole back half of the series is going to press on exactly that spot. Before we get there, though, I want to stay in the light a little longer and look at the part of her creed that is maybe the boldest of all, which is her insistence on being completely, unapologetically herself in a world that is constantly telling everyone to be something cooler. Think again about those sweaters, because I do not think it is possible to overstate how much they are doing. A new one nearly every episode, each hand-knit, each carrying a little symbol that usually says something about the mood or the events of that day. She is a girl who wakes up in the morning and decides who she is going to be, and then knits it. In the grammar of television, a character's outfit is normally the one thing about them that stays fixed, the visual anchor that lets you recognize them across 40 episodes. Mabel breaks that rule constantly, and the fact that she gets away with it, that you always know her instantly anyway, tells you her identity does not live in any single look. It lives in the act of making the look. She is defined not by a costume, but by the refusal to stop reinventing one. And she does it in a place, and at an age, where the overwhelming social pressure is to figure out one acceptable version of yourself, and then hide inside it forever, so nobody can laugh at you. That is the thing about being 12, 13, that the show understands so well. It is the age where self-consciousness arrives like weather, and never fully leaves. It is when kids start performing coolness, start editing themselves down to the parts they think will be accepted, start treating sincerity as the riskiest thing you can be caught doing. Dipper feels this acutely. So much of Dipper's storyline is about a boy desperate to be seen as older, as capable, as not a dorky kid, agonizing over whether he looks foolish, trying to deepen his voice, trying to be taken seriously by a girl a few years older than him. And right next to him is his sister, who appears to have simply never received the message that any of that matters. Mabel is, by any middle school metric, deeply uncool. She is loud, she is weird, she cries at commercials, she talks to her pig, she wears a sweater with a shooting star on it and a smile of glitter. And she does not care. It is not that she is brave about it, exactly. It is that the fear that governs almost every other adolescent, the fear of being seen as ridiculous, seems to have no purchase on her at all. I keep calling that a philosophy, and I want to defend that, because it would be easy to say she is just too young or too silly to feel the embarrassment yet. But that is not what the show gives you. It gives you a girl who feels things intensely, who is perfectly capable of being hurt, who understands social situations well enough to manage everyone else's emotions in them, and who has nonetheless made a choice about her own dignity. The choice is that she would rather be fully herself and occasionally laughed at than be a smaller, safer, edited person who is never laughed at because there is nothing left of her to laugh at. That is authenticity as a moral commitment, not authenticity as an accident of age. And it is rare, in fiction and out of it, to find a character who holds that line without any of the usual armor. No irony, no coolness held in reserve, no secret sophistication she can retreat into if the sincerity gets too exposed. Mabel goes out onto the ledge of being earnest, with absolutely nothing underneath her, every single day, and she does it smiling. The imagination is the other half of this. Her openness, that trait the personality writers keep flagging, expresses itself as a kind of relentless whimsy, a habit of treating the ordinary world as raw material for something more delightful. She does not walk into a boring room and see a boring room. She sees a stage, a craft project, a possible party, a place where something wonderful has simply not happened yet. This is why she takes to Gravity Falls so much faster than Dipper does, and in a way, it is the reverse of what you might expect. Dipper is the one who loves the supernatural, who collects the mysteries and reads the journal and chases the monsters. But Dipper approaches the weirdness as a problem to be solved, a puzzle, something that needs to be understood and, often, defeated. Mabel approaches it as a wonder to be enjoyed. She is not trying to explain the strangeness. She is delighted that it exists, and there is a real philosophical difference in those two postures toward a mysterious world. One that treats mystery as a threat until it is solved, and one that treats mystery as a gift that does not need to be solved to be loved. Mabel lives in the second posture almost entirely. You can see the cost and the gift of this stance in the smaller episodes, the ones that are not about saving anybody. There is an episode where she and Dipper make a bet about who can have the best summer romance, and hers is with a boy who turns out to be a whole crowd of gnomes in a trench coat. And rather than being crushed by that, she is mostly delighted by how absurd it is. There is the whole running current of her chasing romance after romance, each one doomed, none of them denting her belief that the next one might be magic. A more cynical show would use that to make her pathetic, the girl who never learns. Gravity Falls does not do that, and I think that restraint is one of its quiet acts of grace. It refuses to punish her for hoping. It lets her be the girl who keeps her heart wide open, even though the open heart keeps getting bruised. And it treats that not as a flaw to be corrected, but as a way of being that is, on balance, more alive than the alternative. Because that is finally what her authenticity is in service of. It is not vanity, it is not attention-seeking, whatever it might look like from a distance. It is aliveness. Mabel has decided to feel everything at full strength, to want things openly, to make things and give them away, to be embarrassing and sincere and enormous. Because the alternative is to go through your one childhood summer with the volume turned down to protect yourself. And she has looked at that trade and refused it. And this is where I have to start turning the lights lower, because that same refusal, that same insistence on keeping everything she loves close and bright, and never letting the volume drop, is about to meet the one force in the universe it cannot argue with, negotiate with, or craft its way out of. Time. The summer is going to end, childhood is going to end, and the girl who feels everything at full strength is going to feel that ending more than anyone, which brings us to the fear that has been sitting underneath the smile the whole time. Here is the paradox at the center of Mabel Pines, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The sunniest person in the series is also, secretly, the most afraid. Not afraid of monsters, not afraid of the dark, not afraid of any of the things her brother worries about. She is afraid of change, she is afraid of things ending, and because she loves so hard and holds everything so close, the ordinary fact that time moves forward and good things stop being present becomes, for her, a kind of quiet horror she spends the whole series trying not to look at directly. The optimism, read this way, is not the opposite of the fear, it is the wall she has built against it. If you can keep the mood bright enough, keep the party going, keep everyone laughing and close, then maybe you never have to notice that the clock is running. The smile is real, but it is also load-bearing. It is holding up something heavy. You can feel this all the way through the summer, but the show keeps the wish itself simple and repeats it until it becomes almost a prayer. She does not want the summer to end. That is the whole of it, on the surface. Summer, for Mabel, is not a season. It is the container that holds everything she loves in one place at one time: her brother, her uncle, her friends, the town, the adventures, all of it suspended in a golden present, with no next chapter forcing anybody to change or leave or grow up. When she says she wishes the summer could never end, she is not talking about the weather. She is talking about a specific arrangement of the people she loves, and she is saying, please, let it stay exactly like this. And the reason that lands so hard, the reason it stops being a kid's complaint and becomes something closer to the emotional thesis of the entire show, is that it is the most universal wish there is. Everyone has stood in the middle of a good time and felt that pang. The one that says, I would give anything to keep this. Please do not let this be the kind of thing that ends. Mabel just says it out loud, at 12, with her whole chest, because she has not yet learned to be embarrassed about wanting the impossible. And this is where her coping mechanism comes in, the one that is somehow both a joke and one of the more emotionally honest things the series ever does. When it gets to be too much, when the feelings are bigger than she can manage, Mabel pulls her head down inside her sweater and disappears. She calls it Sweater Town. Mabel is not here, she will say, from inside the wool. She is in Sweater Town, and on the surface it is a great gag, a visual punchline, the sight of a girl retreating into her own knitwear like a turtle. But look at what it actually is. It is a person who has built herself a portable safe room out of the things she makes with her own hands, a place to go when reality gets too sharp, a way to be physically present and emotionally absent at the same time. Sweater Town is where she goes to hide from exactly the feelings her optimism is supposed to be protecting her from, and the fact that she needs it, the fact that this relentlessly sunny girl has a designated bunker for despair, tells you that the sunshine was never the whole story. The bunker was always there. Most of the time she just does not need it. I find Sweater Town moving, and I think it is because it refuses to lie about her. A lesser show would give you the pure optimist, the girl whose good cheer is bottomless and uncomplicated, and it would be boring and it would be false, because nobody is actually like that. Real optimism, the kind that a person chooses rather than the kind they are simply born into, always has a shadow, always has a place where the chosen brightness runs out, and the raw fear underneath shows through. Sweater Town is Mabel's shadow made visible, and, in her own way, made bearable. She has not repressed the fear. She has given it an address, and when the fear finally becomes too big for even Sweater Town to hold, which is exactly what happens near the end, you understand instantly how far past her limits she has been pushed, because you have watched her manage smaller versions of it for the entire summer. There is a deeper mechanism worth naming here too, and the story is careful about it. Mabel's fear of the summer ending is really a fear of one specific thing, which is losing her brother. Dipper is the constant. Whatever else changes, whatever boy breaks her heart or plan falls apart, Dipper is the one fixed point, the person who was there before the summer and will be there after it, the twin she came into the world with 5 minutes ahead of. And so as long as she has Dipper, she can survive the ending of everything else. The two of them against the future, the two of them going home together, the two of them staying, on some level, kids together for a little longer. That is the deal she has made with herself. It is the load-bearing assumption underneath all the others. And it means that the single most dangerous thing that could ever happen to Mabel Pines is not a monster, or a demon, or the end of summer. It is the discovery that her brother might be ready to grow up without her. That is the one blow the whole system is not built to survive, and the show, with a cruelty that is really just honesty, aims directly at it. But before it does, before we get to the fall, I want to slow down and look at 2 episodes where her philosophy gets tested in smaller, more survivable ways. Because they are the show doing its homework, gently complicating her sunny creed, so that when the real test comes, it has already shown you this girl is more than a simple optimist. The first is about what happens when kindness meets a world that does not reward it. And the second is the closest Gravity Falls ever comes to putting an actual philosophy lecture in Mabel's mouth, and having her, of all people, be the one who understands it. The first is an episode called Boss Mabel, from the back half of the first season, and it is a small episode with a surprisingly grown-up lesson tucked inside it. The setup is simple. Grunkle Stan runs the Mystery Shack the way Grunkle Stan runs everything, by being rude, cheap, manipulative, and shameless browbeating tourists into buying overpriced junk. Mabel is sure she can do better. She is sure that if you just treat people with genuine kindness, if you are warm and generous and good to your employees and your customers, the money will follow, because a nice world is a functional world, and people reward being treated well. So they make a bet. Stan goes off, and Mabel takes over the shack, determined to prove that you can succeed by being kind. And it does not work. Not at first, and not in the way she expected, because it turns out that pure niceness, kindness with no spine behind it, does not run a business or much of anything else. Her employees walk all over her. Nobody respects a boss who cannot say no, who cannot hold a line, who folds the instant anyone pushes back because the discomfort of conflict is worse to her than the cost of losing. Her coddling backfires. The shack starts to fall apart, not because kindness is wrong, but because kindness without any firmness underneath it is just a way of letting everyone do whatever they want. And Mabel only starts to actually succeed when she learns to keep the kindness but add a backbone, to be warm and be assertive at the same time, to care about people and still tell them no when no is the right answer. I love this episode more than its modest reputation suggests, because of what it does to her philosophy. It could easily have been a story about Mabel being naive and learning that the world is harsh and you have to be a little bit like Stan to survive it. That is the cynical version, and plenty of shows would have written it. Gravity Falls does something more careful. It does not tell Mabel that kindness was a mistake. It tells her that kindness was incomplete. The lesson is not, be less kind. The lesson is that kindness is a value, not a strategy, and that to actually protect the people and things you love, warmth has to be married to strength. A good heart with no firmness cannot defend anything, including itself. And that is a real correction to the sunniest version of her creed, the version that assumes love alone is enough, that if you are just nice enough, everything will work out. The episode plants a seed that the whole rest of the series is going to water, which is that Mabel's greatest strengths, her softness, her warmth, her refusal to be hard, can become liabilities when the stakes get high enough and she has no spine to back them with. There is a lovely, quiet grace note to how it ends, too. Mabel technically wins the bet. By the terms they set, she comes out ahead. But she chooses to let Stan keep the mystery shack anyway, because she can see that the place is his, that it matters to him in a way that goes deeper than winning, and that taking it from him to prove a point would be a small and loveless thing to do. So she wins, and then she gives the prize back, out of exactly the kind of care that the whole episode has just complicated. Which tells you that the correction did not overwrite her. She did not learn to be tougher and then stop being kind. She learned to add toughness and stayed kind, and the final act of the episode is a kindness so large it looks, on the scoreboard, like losing. That is Mabel keeping the core and upgrading the software, and it is a strikingly mature bit of writing for a comedy about a haunted tourist trap. Keep that upgrade in mind, because it is going to matter enormously later. The version of Mabel who cannot hold a firm line, who folds when the emotional pressure gets too high, who would rather avoid the painful confrontation than have it, does not fully go away just because she learned a lesson in one episode. People do not work like that, and neither does she. The tendency is still in there, dialed down but present, and when the pressure comes not from unruly employees but from the deepest fear she has, the fear of losing her brother, that old weakness is going to resurface at the worst possible moment and cost more than a struggling gift shop. But that is later. First, I want to give her the philosophy episode she truly earns. The one where the sparkly optimist turns out to be the one member of the family capable of holding a real and difficult idea about good and evil without flinching from it. The episode is called The Last Mabelcorn, from the second season, and it is my favorite Mabel episode precisely because it looks, at first, like it is going to be the silliest thing the series ever does, and then it turns into something a lot of grown-up stories never manage. The plot need is almost silly. The family needs unicorn hair, because unicorn hair can create a magical barrier to keep a certain triangular threat out of their minds, and unicorns will only give their hair to someone who is pure of heart. So Mabel, obviously, is nominated. Of course it is Mabel. She is the nicest person any of them know, the one who loves everyone, the walking definition of a good heart. If anyone in this family is pure of heart, it is her. She goes off to the unicorn, glowing with confidence, fully expecting to be told what she already believes about herself. And the unicorn tells her she is not pure of heart. Just like that, it looks into her, or claims to, and finds her wanting, and Mabel is devastated. This is a girl whose entire identity is built on being good, on loving people, on doing everything out of kindness, and an authority figure with a horn and a glow has just told her that on some fundamental level she does not measure up. So she does what she would do. She goes on a frantic binge of good deeds, trying to earn the purity, trying to fix whatever is broken in her, helping everyone she can find, desperate to become the good person she has always assumed she was. And it does not work, because you cannot grind your way to a certificate of moral perfection, and the harder she tries, the more she realizes she cannot get there. And then comes the twist that turns the whole thing into philosophy. The unicorns are running a scam. The whole pure of heart test is a con. Unicorns cannot actually see into anyone's heart at all. They just say they can, and they use it to keep people away and to feel superior, hoarding their magic behind a moral gate that does not really exist. There is no cosmic scanner measuring the goodness of your soul. There never was. The entire premise Mabel had been tearing herself apart over was a lie sold by a creature that had every reason to sell it. And when that lands, the episode opens all the way up, because if there is no such thing as measurable purity of heart, then the whole idea of dividing people into the pure and the impure, the good and the bad, collapses. What the episode arrives at, and it says this remarkably plainly for a kid's cartoon, is that there is no such thing as a purely good person or a purely evil one. Everyone is a mix. Everyone has selfish impulses and generous ones, cruelty and kindness, all tangled together. And the thing that actually matters is not some fixed inner grade, but what you intend and what you do. Morality is gray. It is relative. It is about the messy, ongoing work of trying, not about passing a test that certifies you as clean. And the person who has to absorb this, the person the lesson is delivered to, is Mabel, the optimist, the one you would most expect to want a simple black and white world where good people are good and love conquers all. There is a moment near the end where the character Ford, the family's resident genius, reassures her that she is a good person, and she agrees, but she adds something. She says she has realized that morality is relative, and I want you to sit with how strange and wonderful that is. The sparkly one, the ham, the girl everyone underestimates, is the character who walks out of this story holding one of the more sophisticated moral ideas the story ever gestures at, and holding it lightly, without it having broken her. Because that is the part that I think is genuinely profound about how the episode resolves. Mabel does not become a cynic. She does not decide that because purity is a scam, goodness does not matter, or that because everyone is gray, nothing is worth trying for. That would be the easy, adolescent version of the lesson, the one that curdles into nihilism, and it is exactly the lesson that a certain triangular villain would love her to learn. What she does instead is far braver. She lets go of the fantasy of being perfectly good, and she keeps trying to be good anyway. She accepts that she is a mix, that she has selfishness in her, that there is no gold star coming, and she goes on choosing love and kindness not because it earns her anything, but because it is who she wants to be. That is the difference between a person who is good because they are afraid of not being good enough, and a person who is good because they have decided to be. The last Mabelcorn quietly graduates her from the first into the second. And this is why it matters so much for everything that is coming. The show has now shown you, twice, that Mabel is not the simple sunbeam people take her for. She understands that kindness needs a spine. She understands that morality is gray, and that she herself is not purely good. She has, in other words, been handed exactly the self-knowledge she is going to need, the awareness that she contains selfishness, that her love can go wrong, that she is capable of doing harm, which makes what happens next so much sadder and so much more human. Because knowing something about yourself in a calm moment, in an episode with a tidy resolution, is a completely different thing from remembering it when the ground opens up and the one fear you cannot survive comes true. And then, when it counts most, when she is more frightened and more alone than she has ever been, the impure part of her, the part that loves so hard it becomes selfish, is going to make a choice that helps end the world. So let me tell you how the crack finally opens. It opens first in an episode called Sock Opera, and it opens so gently that you almost do not notice it is the beginning of the end. The setup is pure Mabel. She develops a crush on a boy named Gabe, who is into puppetry, and in her usual all-in fashion she decides to win him over by staging an entire elaborate sock puppet show, throwing herself into it with everything she has. Meanwhile, Dipper is deep in his own storyline, obsessed with cracking a password on a laptop that could open up more of the town's mysteries, exhausted, running himself down to nothing. And this is the small, human, almost invisible thing that goes wrong. Mabel is so consumed by her own project, so focused on the boy and the puppets and the fantasy of the romance, that she stops being available to her brother. She neglects him, not cruelly, not on purpose, just completely, the way anyone can neglect someone when they are lost in wanting something badly enough. And that neglect is the opening a certain villain has been waiting for, because Dipper, overworked and alone and desperate to solve his puzzle, is exactly the kind of person who makes a bad deal. This is where Bill Cipher gets his way into Dipper's body, through a deal, through a handshake, exploiting a boy who felt he had no one to turn to. I am not going to retell the whole mechanics of how Bill operates. We have spent entire other nights on that triangle and his rules. But the one thing that matters here is where the vulnerability came from. It came from Mabel's attention being somewhere else. Her self-absorption did not summon the demon, but it created the loneliness the demon walked through. And when she finally realizes what has happened, when she understands that her brother is in danger and that her own distraction helped put him there, it is Mabel who saves him. She is the one who ultimately gets Bill out and gets Dipper back. So the episode both indicts her and redeems her in the same motion. Her love went inward, toward her own wants, and that turned into harm. And then her love turned back outward, toward her brother, and that saved him. Both directions of the same enormous heart in one episode. I want to be honest that Sock Opera is not really an episode about Mabel doing something wrong in any villainous sense. 12-year-olds get distracted by crushes. That is not a moral failing, it is just being 12. But the show is doing something deliberate by putting this beat here, in this order, and I do not think it is an accident. It is establishing a pattern. The pattern is that when Mabel turns the full force of her wanting toward something for herself, toward a fantasy, toward a version of events she desperately wishes were true, she can lose sight of the people around her, and in a world with a predator in it who feeds on exactly that kind of tunnel vision, losing sight of people has consequences. Bill learns something in Sock Opera, in a sense. He learns that the way into this family is through the gap that opens when one twin's desire pulls them away from the other. He tried it through Dipper's loneliness. Later he is going to try it through Mabel's, and it is going to work far, far better. Because think about what the ingredients are now. You have a girl whose deepest fear is the summer ending and her brother growing up without her. You have shown that her love, when it curdles into wanting, can blind her to the people she loves most. You have established that she has a weakness for retreating into fantasy when reality gets painful, whether that is Sweater Town or a puppet show version of a romance that does not really exist. And you have a villain who reads people perfectly and offers them exactly the escape they most want in the moment they are most desperate for it. Every piece of the machine is now on the table. All that is missing is the trigger, the single event that would push Mabel past the edge of her fear, past the reach of Sweater Town, past the self-knowledge she picked up from the unicorns, into a place where she is frightened enough and lonely enough to do something that cannot be taken back. And the show, being what it is, does not invent some outlandish catastrophe to get her there. It uses the plainest thing in the world. It uses the fact that her brother is starting to grow up. That is all it takes. Not a monster, not a curse, just the quiet, unstoppable, completely natural process of a 12-year-old boy beginning to imagine a future that might be his own, separate from his sister, and Mabel overhearing it at the worst possible moment. The apocalypse in Gravity Falls, when it comes, does not come from evil. It comes from love that is too frightened of change to let go. So let me walk you into the fall, carefully, because I think it is one of the wisest pieces of storytelling the series ever attempts, and it is also the moment where her whole philosophy either breaks or has to be rebuilt from the ground up. The episode is called Dipper and Mabel versus the Future, and the title is doing a lot of work, because that is exactly what it is about. Two children standing at the edge of the future and reacting to it in opposite ways. The summer is almost over. Their 13th birthday is coming, which in the logic of the series means the official end of childhood, the line they will cross together. And Mabel has a plan. Of course she has a plan. She always has a plan. She is going to throw the perfect birthday party. She has built up this party in her head as the seal on the perfect summer, the thing that will let them go out on a high note, everyone together, everything wonderful, one last golden day before real life resumes. She is doing what she always does. She is trying to make a container beautiful enough to hold the moment still. And while she is doing that, her brother is being offered a different future. Dipper has grown close to their great-uncle Ford, the genius, the author of the journals, the man whose mind Dipper has idolized all summer. And Ford offers him something enormous. He offers to make Dipper his apprentice, to have him stay in Gravity Falls after the summer ends, to study the mysteries of the town, to become the person Dipper has secretly always wanted to be. For Dipper, this is a dream. It is recognition from the one adult whose recognition means everything to him, and it is a future that is his, chosen by him, pointed at the things he loves most. And he is tempted. He actually considers it. He does not say no right away. Now here is the piece of craft that makes this scene devastating instead of just sad. Mabel finds out the way you find out the things that hurt most, by accident, overhearing something she was never meant to hear. Through a walkie-talkie, she catches Dipper talking about the apprenticeship, talking about staying, and in that moment the entire architecture of her world comes down at once. Because remember what Dipper is to her. He is the one constant. He is the fixed point that was supposed to make every other ending survivable. Whatever else changed, they were going to face it together, go home together, stay each other's person. And now she is hearing, in his own voice, that he might not come home at all, that he might choose to stay behind, to grow up into his own separate life, without her. The summer ending was always the fear. This is worse than the fear. This is the fear's final form. This is her brother choosing the future over her, and she cannot hold it. Sweater Town is not big enough for this. The self-knowledge from the unicorns, the lesson about kindness needing a spine, none of the tools she has built up over the summer are equal to a blow this size, and she comes apart. She is more frightened and more alone than she has ever been, standing in the wreckage of the one assumption she could not live without. And that is the exact moment, of course it is, that the predator appears with a gift. Bill Cipher, wearing the disguise of a time traveler named Blendon, approaches her with an offer perfectly shaped to her wound. He offers her a way to make the summer never end, a bubble outside of time where the good moment could be held forever, where nothing would ever have to change, where Dipper would never grow up and leave, where the golden present could be sealed away safe from the future forever. Everything she has ever wanted, offered by a liar in her weakest hour. All he asks for in return is a small thing she happens to be carrying, a strange little object, the dimensional rift. She has no idea what it is. It looks like a trinket, and in exchange for the promise of a summer that never ends, she hands it over, and Bill smashes it, and the rift tears open the sky, and the world ends. That is Weirdmageddon. That is the beginning of the apocalypse that consumes the back third of the series. It starts because a heartbroken 12-year-old, tricked by a demon at the worst moment of her life, traded away the safety of reality for the promise that nothing she loved would ever have to change. I want to be very fair about what this is and is not, because this is one of the most talked about beats in the whole show, and it gets flattened in both directions. It is true, factually, in the plainest canon sense, that Mabel's choice is what lets Bill into our world and triggers the end of everything. Weirdmageddon happens because she gave him the rift. There is no getting around that, and the fandom has argued about it for years, some people insisting the apocalypse was Mabel's fault. But watch how carefully the show itself frames it, because the framing is the whole point. It does not present her as evil or even as reckless. It presents her as manipulated, at her lowest, by a being who reads people perfectly, offered exactly the thing her entire psychology had been organized around wanting. She did not know what the rift was. She did not know Blendon was Bill. She was a devastated child who was offered a way to stop the pain, and she took it, the way a devastated child would. The horror of the scene is not that she is bad. The horror is that she is so recognizably, achingly human. Every single one of us, handed the power to freeze the best moment of our life right before we lose it, would feel the pull of that. And this is where her philosophy is exposed all the way down to its foundations. Because Weirdmageddon is not just a plot event. It is the literal, cosmic, external consequence of the fault line we found back at the beginning. The whole time, underneath the optimism, there was a person who could not bear for good things to end, who loved so hard that letting go felt like dying. That was the crack. And the story takes that crack, that entirely internal, entirely relatable emotional flaw, and it externalizes it into the actual end of the world. The rift in the sky is the rift in Mabel. Her refusal to accept change becomes a tear in reality itself. It is the starkest possible dramatization of what happens when the wish for an endless summer is granted, and the answer it gives is unflinching. If you actually got what Mabel wanted, if time really did stop so that nothing you loved ever had to change, it would not be paradise, it would be the apocalypse. Clinging to the good moment hard enough to freeze it does not preserve the world, it ends it. And now the show has to do the hardest thing of all, which is to take this girl into the ruins of the world her fear helped make, put her inside the perfect fantasy she thought she wanted, and ask her, this time knowing everything, whether she will choose it, which is where we arrive at Mabeland. Once Weirdmageddon begins, Bill does something to Mabel that is, in its way, the cruelest thing he does to anyone in the whole show, and he does it by giving her everything she wants. He traps her inside a prison bubble, a pocket world built entirely out of her own desires, and the fandom calls it Mabeland. It is a place where every single thing bends to her happiness. The sky is the color she likes. Everyone adores her. Boys line up for her. Her friends are there, or perfect versions of them. There is candy and color and endless celebration, and nothing that could ever hurt her. And crucially, it never ends, and nothing in it ever has to change. It is the summer that never stops, made real. It is, quite precisely, the exact thing she traded the world away to get. Bill has given her her own wish as a cage, and that is the genius and the horror of it. Bill describes this trap as one of his most diabolical, and he is not bragging idly. He says it would take a will of titanium to resist it, and he means that most people would never even want to leave. Because how could you? Everything you have ever wanted is here, forever, perfectly. Why would anyone walk out of paradise back into an apocalypse? The prison has no walls because it does not need walls. The only thing keeping Mabel inside is that she does not want to leave, and a prison you do not want to escape is the surest prison there is. This is what makes Mabeland so much more sophisticated than a normal cell. It does not restrain her against her will. It aligns itself with her will so completely that her own desires become the bars. Now, the show never says the name I am about to say, and I want to be clear about that up front. This is my reading, not the creator's stated intent, but I do not think there is a cleaner real-world parallel to Mabeland anywhere in philosophy than a thought experiment proposed by a philosopher named Robert Nozick back in 1974 in a book called Anarchy, State, and Utopia. He called it the experience machine, and the setup is almost eerily close to what Bill builds for Mabel. Imagine, Nozick says, that neuroscientists could build a machine you could plug into that would give you the experience of any life you wanted. Any pleasure, any triumph, any love, any joy, all of it feeling completely real from the inside, indistinguishable from actual living. You would not know you were in the machine. You would simply feel like the happiest, most fulfilled version of yourself, forever. The only catch is that none of it is real. You are floating in a tank, and everything you are experiencing is a simulation. The question Nozick asks is simple. Would you plug in? Would you do it? And Nozick's argument, the reason he built the thought experiment, is that most of us, if we are honest, would not plug in, and the fact that we would not tells us something profound about what we actually value. Because if pleasure were the only thing that mattered, if a good life were simply a life that felt good from the inside, then plugging in would be an obvious yes, an easy trade, more pleasure and less pain than any real life could offer. But something in us recoils from it. And Nozick says what we recoil from is the unreality. We do not just want to have the experience of doing things, we want to actually do them. We do not just want to feel loved, we want to actually be loved by real people who really exist. We want our lives to connect to reality, to be true, and not merely to feel true. Authenticity, in other words, is not a bonus on top of happiness. For most of us, it turns out to be more important than happiness. We would rather have a real life that includes real pain than a perfect fake one that does not. That is exactly the choice Mabeland puts to Mabel, except the series raises the stakes higher than Nozick ever could, because it is not asking a stranger in a philosophy seminar. It is asking the one character whose entire being is organized around wanting the good moment to last forever. If anyone in fiction has a reason to plug in, it is Mabel. The machine is not a hypothetical for her. It is her deepest wish, granted, and she is already inside it. And so when Dipper and Wendy and Seuss break into the bubble to rescue her, the drama is not really about fighting their way in. The drama is that they cannot simply drag her out. Because the prison is her desire, and you cannot pull someone out of a prison made of their own wanting. She has to want to leave. She has to choose reality over the perfect illusion, from the inside, with full knowledge of what she is giving up. That is the will of titanium Bill was talking about, not physical strength. The strength to look at paradise and walk away from it because it is not true. And what actually frees her is not an argument about authenticity, it is her brother. When Dipper reaches her, the thing that breaks the spell is not a lecture about reality being better than fantasy. It is Dipper telling her the truth about the two of them. He tells her he is not going to take the apprenticeship. He is not going to stay behind. He is choosing her, choosing to go home together, choosing to face the future, whatever it holds, at her side. The whole catastrophe started because Mabel believed she was about to lose her brother to the future. And the thing that pulls her out of the fantasy is Dipper giving that fear its answer, promising that the one constant really is constant, that they will face what comes together. The reason she can let go of the perfect fake summer is that she is being handed back the one real thing she was most afraid of losing. I think that is a more honest resolution than the pure philosophical version, and let me say why. Nozick's argument is abstract. It says we value reality in principle, but real people do not usually choose the hard truth over the comfortable lie for abstract reasons. They do it for love. They do it because there is someone real on the other side of the choice, someone actual who needs them, someone whose realness makes the fake world suddenly feel thin and lonely by comparison. Mabel does not leave Mabeland because she has reasoned her way to the conclusion that authenticity matters more than pleasure. She leaves because a real person she loves is standing in front of her, promising to stay real with her. And next to that, even a perfect paradise is revealed for what it is, which is empty because there is no actual Dipper in it, only a copy. The candy and the color and the adoration are all still there in Mabeland, and none of it is worth one true moment with the real brother who came to find her. That is her whole philosophy, the love-first ethic, corrected and completed in a single choice. Love is not about keeping the good moment. Love is the thing that makes you willing to lose the good moment, willing to accept change and pain and endings, because to refuse that is to trade away everything real for a beautiful nothing. And notice what she is actually renouncing when she walks out of that bubble. She is renouncing her own founding wish. The girl who wanted the summer to hold still forever chooses, with her eyes open, a world in which the summer will end, in which she will grow up, in which she will lose things and change, and eventually leave Gravity Falls behind. She chooses the future. She chooses time. She chooses reality with all its endings over an eternity of perfect, motionless, unreal happiness. That is the single largest act of growth any character makes in the series, and it belongs to the one everybody underestimated. The optimist does not learn to be less hopeful. She learns that real hope has to be pointed at real life, not at a fantasy of a life that never moves. Optimism that requires freezing time is not optimism at all. It is fear wearing optimism's sweater. And Mabel finally takes the sweater off and looks the future in the face. There is one more thing I love about how the show handles this, and it is the negative version of the point, the thing it refuses to do. It never frames Mabel as having been rescued against her will. It would have been so easy, and so much less true, to write it as the boys breaking in and hauling her out while she screams to be left in paradise. That is not what happens. The emotional beat, the entire weight of the scene, rests on her deciding. She is the one who chooses to leave. Her agency is the whole point, because a philosophy about accepting reality only means anything if the person accepts it freely. If she were dragged out, she would have learned nothing and chosen nothing. Because she walks out on her own, she becomes, in that moment, a person who has truly changed, who has met the hardest test her worldview could face, and passed it not by force but by choice. And that changed person is the one who walks back into the wreckage of the real world to help fix what her fear helped break, which is where her philosophy stops being about her and starts being about everyone, and where it finally goes head-to-head with the worldview that is its exact opposite. Because if Mabel is one pole of the story, Bill Cipher is the other, and the two of them are not just hero and villain. They are two complete and opposite answers to the same question. The question of what to do with the fact that everything is impermanent and reality is strange and nothing lasts. We have spent whole other nights inside Bill's head, so I am not going to relitigate the demon here, but I do want to hold his worldview up next to hers for a moment, because they were built to be mirror images, and the contrast is the cleanest philosophical axis in the entire series. Bill's position is nihilism, more or less pure. There is a line of his from an earlier episode that has become almost a mission statement for him. He says reality is an illusion, the universe is a hologram, and then, in that same breath, tells you to buy gold. And I want to point out how much is packed into that little speech, because it is not just villain nonsense, it is an actual philosophy stated compactly. If reality is an illusion, if nothing is truly real, then nothing truly matters. And if nothing matters, then anything is permitted. And the only sane response to a meaningless universe is to grab whatever you can, indulge whatever you want, and laugh at the fools who still believe in things like love and loyalty and consequence. That is Bill. He looks at the impermanence of everything, the same impermanence that terrifies Mabel, and he draws the opposite conclusion. She looks at a world where nothing lasts and decides that means everything is precious. He looks at the same world and decides that means nothing is. And the buy gold at the end is the perfect cynical punchline, because it says even the guy telling you nothing is real still wants to make sure he comes out ahead. Nihilism that somehow still has a portfolio. Now set that beside Mabel, and watch how exactly she is his refutation. Mabel also knows on some level that nothing lasts. Her whole fear is built on it. She feels the impermanence of things more acutely than anyone in the series, more even than Bill, because she actually loves the things that are passing and he does not love anything at all. But her response to impermanence is the opposite of his. She does not conclude that because the summer ends, the summer is meaningless. She concludes that because the summer ends, the summer is holy, that its very fragility is what makes it worth loving with everything she has. To Bill, the fact that a moment will not last is proof that it was never worth anything. To Mabel, the fact that a moment will not last is exactly why you pour yourself into it completely. Those are not two moods. They are two entire metaphysics, two opposite theories of what a temporary thing is worth, and the show stages them as a war for reality itself. And here is the detail that I think reveals which side the story believes, and it is not a speech, it is a plot fact. When the family finally moves to defeat Bill, when they need to actually save the world, they cannot do it without Mabel. Dipper says so outright at one point, that he cannot beat Bill without her. Think about what that means structurally. The logician, the mystery solver, the one with all the knowledge, the boy who has spent the whole summer accumulating facts and theories about how the world works, cannot defeat the nihilist by himself. Knowledge is not enough. Cleverness is not enough. The thing that is required, the thing without which the demon cannot be beaten, is the exact quality Bill holds in most contempt. It is the bond between the twins. It is love, loyalty, the refusal to abandon each other, the very stuff Bill dismisses as an illusion for suckers. The show builds its entire climax so that the antidote to nihilism is not a better argument, it is a stronger attachment. You do not outreason the belief that nothing matters, you outlove it. And that is a bold thing for a story to claim, because nihilism is, in a certain cold sense, unbeatable in an argument. You cannot logically prove to a committed nihilist that things matter. Any reason you give, they can dissolve. Meaning is not the kind of thing you can force someone to see with a syllogism, so it does not try. Instead, it does something wiser. It says meaning is not proven, it is chosen and it is lived, and the proof of it is not in an argument, but in what people are willing to do for each other. Mabel does not defeat Bill's worldview by refuting it. She defeats it by being living evidence against it, by being a person whose love is so real and so consequential that in her presence the claim that nothing is real simply looks stupid. The rift she opened out of fear gets closed, in the end, by the same enormous heart that opened it, now pointed the right way. Her love ended the world, and her love is part of what takes it back. There is a bitter irony sitting underneath all of this that I do not want to skate past, because it is what keeps it from being simple. Bill only got his chance because Mabel's love went wrong. Her attachment, her inability to let go, was the very thing he exploited to get in. So it is not as if love is a clean weapon and nihilism a clean enemy. The same force that saves the world nearly destroyed it, depending only on whether it was pointed at reality or at a fantasy, at the real brother or at a frozen summer. That is the mature version of the show's thesis, and it is why I keep saying Mabel's philosophy gets corrected rather than simply vindicated. The lesson is not that love always wins and optimism is always right. The lesson is that love aimed at keeping things the same becomes a weapon in the hands of the void, and love that accepts change and endings and reality becomes the only thing that can stand against it. Same love, opposite directions. One opens the rift, the other closes it. And the whole moral weight of Mabel's arc is her learning, at enormous cost, which direction to point the largest thing about her. So that is the axis, the two poles, Mabel and Bill, love and nihilism, the preciousness of the temporary against the meaninglessness of the temporary. But there are gentler contrasts in the series too, and I think they are just as important, because not every alternative to Mabel's worldview is a demon. Some of them are just the other people in her family, each facing the same unbearable fact of change in their own way. So let me set her beside the two men who raised her that summer, and the brother who came into the world beside her, because the show is offering you 4 different ways to stand at the edge of an ending, and only one of them, in the end, is the one it wants you to choose. Start with Dipper, because he is the closest to her and the furthest from her at the same time. Dipper faces the ending of childhood the way he faces everything, by trying to get ahead of it, to be ready, to grow up faster than it can catch him. His whole storyline is a boy sprinting toward adulthood, wanting to be taken seriously, wanting to be capable, wanting to be the man with the answers instead of the anxious kid. Where Mabel wants to freeze time so she never has to grow up, Dipper wants to fast forward it so he can be grown up already. And the apprenticeship offer is the perfect expression of that, a chance to leap straight into the adult life he has been reaching for all summer. His way of coping with the fear of change is to run at the change, to try to master it before it masters him. And the series is honest that this is its own kind of trap. A boy so busy becoming an adult that he almost abandons the sister who is the best thing about his childhood. Two twins, same fear, opposite reactions. One clings to the past, one lunges at the future, and both of them, in doing so, nearly lose the person who mattered most. What saves them both is that they meet in the middle, that Dipper stops running toward the future long enough to choose Mabel, and Mabel stops clinging to the past long enough to choose the future with him. They cure each other. The overclinger and the overrunner teach each other how to stand still and face it together. Then there is Grunkle Stan, and Stan is the cynic, the one who has decided the way to survive a world that takes everything from you is to expect nothing from it and trust no one. He is a con man, a liar, a man who has built his whole life on fakery and gruffness and a hard shell. On the surface, he looks like the anti-Mabel, the person who has given up on everything she believes in, sincerity, hope, openness. He mocks sentiment, he calls people suckers, he runs a scam for a living. If Mabel is a wide-open heart, Stan is a heart in a bunker with the door welded shut. But here is the thing the whole show is built to reveal, and I will not retell his backstory in detail because we have spent whole nights on the two Stans and the decades of estrangement between the brothers. But the core of it is this. Underneath all that cynicism, Stan spent 30 years of his life secretly, obsessively, at enormous personal cost, trying to get his brother back. The cynicism was never the truth of him. It was the scar tissue. It was what grew over a wound of pure loyalty and pure love that he could not bear to show anyone. And that is the show's sly argument about cynicism. It says the cynic is very often just a wounded optimist in disguise, a person who loved so much and lost so badly that they built a hard shell to keep it from happening again. And the shell is not the opposite of the heart, it is the thing protecting the heart, which makes Stan, of all people, secretly one of Mabel's closest kin. She loves out loud and he loves in hiding, but they are running the same engine. And you can see the recognition between them all through the series. Stan is gruff with everyone, but he softens around Mabel in a way he softens around almost no one, because she is what he might have been if life had not beaten the openness out of him, and she is what he still wishes he could be. There is a whole reading of the show in which Mabel is Stan's second chance, the family member who gets to keep the open heart he had to give up, and part of why he fights so hard to protect her and Dipper is that he is protecting the innocence he lost. When it comes time for the ultimate sacrifice, the thing that finally beats Bill, it is Stan who pays it, and I will get to that in a moment. But hold on to the idea that the crusty cynic and the sparkly optimist were never really opposites. They were the same love, one worn openly and one buried under 40 years of armor. Then there is Ford, the fourth way, and Ford is maybe the sharpest warning of all, because Ford is what happens when you meet the mystery of the world with pure intellect and no heart to balance it. Ford is brilliant, the smartest person in the series, the author of the journals, the mind Dipper idolizes. And his brilliance is exactly what nearly destroyed him and the world, because his hunger to know, to understand, to pry open every secret, made him the perfect mark for a demon who dangled knowledge in front of him. Ford's whole tragedy is curiosity without wisdom, intelligence without the emotional grounding that would have told him when to stop. He is the warning at the other end of the spectrum from Mabel. If she is heart that can lose sight of reason, he is reason that lost sight of heart. And both of those imbalances, in this show, open doors that should have stayed shut. It is not an accident that the two people Bill successfully manipulates into world-ending mistakes are Ford, through his hunger for knowledge, and Mabel, through her hunger to keep her love unchanged. The demon does not tempt people with evil. He tempts them with the thing they love most, twisted just slightly out of true. So there is the family. 4 answers to the same unbearable question. Dipper runs at the future. Stan armors himself against it. Ford tries to think his way through it and gets lost. And Mabel, at first, tries to freeze it. And the reason her answer is the one the show finally endorses is not that her first instinct was right, because it was not. It nearly ended everything. It is that she is the only one who fully transforms her answer over the course of the story. She starts by trying to freeze time, and she ends by choosing time. And that arc, that willingness to have her deepest instinct proven wrong and to change it anyway, is itself the wisest thing in the story. Because the real lesson is not clinging, and it is not running, and it is not armor, and it is not pure intellect. The real lesson is the thing Mabel arrives at last, which is that you face the ending together, with your heart open and your eyes open at the same time, holding on to the people while letting go of the moment. And notice that when they finally beat Bill, the solution is not any one of these 4 postures alone. It is all of them combined. It takes Ford's knowledge, Stan's sacrifice, Dipper's cleverness, and Mabel's heart, working as one family, to close the rift and take back the falls. No single worldview saves the world. The overthinker and the overrunner and the armored cynic and the open optimist only win when they stop being rivals and become a family, each supplying what the others lack. And that is a gentler, truer picture of how people actually survive change than any lone philosophy could give you. You do not need to have the perfect stance toward mortality and impermanence and loss. You need people who have different stances than you, standing next to you, covering the places where your own way of coping fails. Mabel's optimism needs Dipper's caution and Stan's toughness and Ford's knowledge to become something that can actually save anyone. And theirs needs her heart. That is the family the show is really about, and it is the answer to the fear that runs under everything. Which brings me to the single most Mabel thing in the entire series, the small, sentimental, apparently silly object that ends up doing what all of Ford's genius could not. To understand this, you need to know how Bill is actually beaten, and it is worth telling because it is one of the loveliest mechanisms the show ever built. When the family finally corners Bill, they do it with a trick. They lure him into Stan's mind, and once he is inside, Ford, disguised as Stan, uses a device called the memory gun to erase him. It works. Bill is destroyed, but the cost is catastrophic, because erasing Bill from inside Stan's mind means erasing Stan's mind. The memory gun wipes everything. Stan forgets who he is. He forgets Ford, forgets the town, forgets the whole life he clawed back over 30 years. And, worst of all, he forgets the twins. He looks at Dipper and Mabel, the 2 children he loves more than anything in the world, the 2 kids he was willing to erase his entire self to save, and there is nothing there, no recognition. The greatest act of love in the series costs the person who performs it his memory of everyone he loves. He saves the world and pays for it by losing the world, becoming a blank, an old man who does not know his own family. And here is where the sparkly one, the ham, the girl everyone underestimated, does the thing that no genius, no journal, no piece of technology in the whole series could do. Mabel brings out her scrapbook. All summer, while Dipper was cataloging monsters and Ford was decoding mysteries, Mabel was doing what looked like the least important activity imaginable. She was making a scrapbook, gluing in photos, keeping ticket stubs, saving glitter and drawings and the small, dumb evidence of ordinary happy days. Everyone else's records were about understanding the world. Hers was about loving it. And when Stan's mind is a blank slate, when the memory gun has taken everything, it is Mabel's scrapbook, and the family telling him the stories inside it, that slowly, gently, brings him back. The photographs, the captions, the accumulated proof of a summer of love, reach into the emptiness and pull Stan's self back out of it. His memories return not through science but through sentiment, through exactly the sentimental keepsakes that a more serious person would have dismissed as clutter. I cannot overstate how much this scene means to Mabel's whole philosophy, because it is the show putting its money where its mouth is. For the entire series, Mabel's habits have been treated, gently, as the frivolous ones. The crafts, the scrapbooking, the hoarding of small mementos, the endless documentation of feelings, all of it sitting a little to the side of the serious business of solving mysteries and fighting monsters. And then, at the climax of everything, at the moment of highest stakes, it turns out that Mabel's frivolous habit is the one thing that can undo the ultimate catastrophe. Her sentimentality is not a weakness the story tolerates. It is a superpower the story reveals. All that time she spent treasuring the small good moments, refusing to let them go unmarked, insisting that a ticket stub and a photograph and a bad drawing were worth keeping, turns out, of everything, to have been the practical one. Because it is the record of love, and the record of love is what brings a person back from nothing. And there is a quiet philosophical payoff here that I find deeply satisfying, because it resolves the tension that has been running through her whole arc. Remember the problem: Mabel loves the past so much that she wanted to freeze it, and that wanting nearly ended the world. So the danger of her sentimentality, its shadow, is the refusal to let time move. But the scrapbook shows the other face of the same trait, the healthy face, and the difference between them is everything. Freezing the moment is trying to stop time. Keeping the scrapbook is letting time move while carrying the moment with you. One is a prison and the other is a treasure. Mabeland was the sick version of Mabel's love of the past, an attempt to live inside a frozen moment forever. The scrapbook is the healthy version, an acceptance that the moment is gone, is over, has passed into the past like everything does, combined with a refusal to let it be lost. You cannot keep the summer, but you can keep the pictures of the summer. You cannot stop your uncle from aging or the world from changing, but you can hold the story of who he was and give it back to him when he needs it. That distinction is, I think, the whole answer the story gives to Mabel's founding fear, and it is a wise one. The fear was that things end, and the answer is not that things do not end, because they do. That is real. That is not something optimism can wish away. The answer is that ending is not the same as being erased. A summer that ends is not a summer that never happened. A childhood you grow out of is not a childhood you lose. The love in it stays real forever. It becomes part of you. It goes into the scrapbook of the self, and it can be pulled back out, and it can save you. Mabel does not learn to stop things from ending. She learns that the alternative to freezing a moment is not losing it, it is remembering it. And that remembering is a form of love that can survive the moment's death. That is why the scrapbook beats the memory gun. The memory gun erases. The scrapbook restores. One is the technology of forgetting, and the other is the technology of love. And in the deepest confrontation in the series, love wins by literally out-remembering the machine of erasure. There is even a lovely inversion buried in it. When you set it beside the rules of the world, the memory gun can wipe a mind clean, but the show is careful to establish that memories erased by it can be restored by representing them, that this kind of forgetting is reversible in a way that true erasure is not. And Mabel is the one who does the restoring. She is the counterforce to the erasure machine. In a story that spent so much time on things being lost, twins estranged for decades, a portal that swallowed a man for 30 years, a town whose memories were stolen over and over, Mabel stands at the end as the character who gives things back, who reverses the losing, who proves that not everything that seems gone has to stay gone. And she does it not with power, but with a book full of glitter and photographs and love. If you ever wanted a single image for her entire philosophy, it is that. An old man with an empty mind, and a girl with a scrapbook, patiently reading him back into himself, one happy memory at a time, until he remembers that he is loved. So now, with the world saved and Stan restored and Bill gone, there is only the ending left, the real one, the one Mabel spent the whole summer dreading. The summer actually ends. And I want to look closely at how she meets it, because it is where the philosophy finally comes to rest. The twins turn 13. That was always the marker, the line, the thing the whole season was counting down to. And when it comes without a demon or a disaster attached to it, which is the point. For most of the series, Mabel treated her 13th birthday as a kind of death, the end of childhood, the moment everything good would be taken away. And what the story does, having put her through the apocalypse and out the other side, is let the birthday finally just be a birthday, She turns 13 and the world does not end. The summer ends, which is a different and gentler thing, and she is able, at last, to let it. Because she has already faced the worst version of the ending. She has already been offered the frozen summer and turned it down. Compared to Mabeland, compared to the choice she already made in the prison bubble, an ordinary goodbye is something she can survive, and more than survive, something she can meet with grace. They leave Gravity Falls. They get on the bus to go home to Piedmont, California, back to their ordinary life, their parents, their school, the world that was always waiting for them at the end of the season. And Mabel takes Waddles with her. That detail is small, and it undoes me a little every time, because Waddles is the thing she chose out of pure love at the start. The pig she wanted instantly and completely, and the fact that she gets to bring him home is the show quietly telling you that she does not have to lose everything, that some of the summer comes with her. She does not get to keep the summer, but she gets to keep the pig. She gets to keep the memories, the scrapbook, the bond with her brother that is stronger now than it has ever been. Growing up, the story is saying, is not about having everything you love stripped away. It is about learning which things you carry forward and being at peace with which things you leave behind. The town stays, the pig comes home, and look at who she is on that bus compared to who she was at the start. At the beginning of the summer, she was an optimist whose optimism had never really been tested, a girl who was happy because nothing had yet forced her to choose happiness in the face of real loss. At the end, she is an optimist who has been to the bottom, who helped end the world out of fear, who was offered a perfect fake paradise and walked out of it, who watched her uncle lose his mind and read him back into himself, who is now, willingly, letting go of the best summer of her life. That is a completely different kind of optimism. The first kind was innocence. The second kind is something you can only earn, a hope that has looked directly at loss and change and endings, and chosen to remain hopeful anyway, not because it does not know better, but because it does. She is not less sunny at the end. She is sunny in a way that has weight now, that has been through the dark and come back, and that is worth infinitely more than the untested brightness she started with. This is the thing about her arc that I think is easy to miss because the series is so gentle about it. Mabel is the character who changes the most, and she changes in the direction of growing up, and yet she does it without losing herself. That is genuinely hard to write. It would have been so easy to make her arc a story about a silly girl who learns to be more serious, more like her brother, more sensible, growing out of the glitter and the crafts and the boy craziness into someone more mature and less fun. That is the standard, boring version of a coming-of-age arc, the one where growing up means subtraction, means becoming quieter and smaller and more careful. The show refuses it completely. Mabel grows up, and she is still Mabel. She still loves loudly, still makes things, still hopes, still brings the pig. What changed is not her personality. What changed is that her love learned to hold hands with reality, that her hope learned to include endings, that her enormous heart learned the one lesson it was missing, which is how to let go of a moment without letting go of the love inside it. And I keep coming back to the fact that this whole enormous lesson is delivered through the least likely vessel for it. If you had watched the first episode and someone had told you that the series' deepest meditation on mortality and change, and the courage it takes to grow up, would be carried by the sparkly girl with the braces, and not by her brooding, intellectual brother, you would not have believed them. Dipper is the one who looks like the show's philosopher, the one with the questions and the journal and the search for truth. But the truth Dipper searches for is out in the world, in the mysteries and the monsters, and it turns out to be the smaller truth. The bigger truth, the one the whole show is actually about, is inside Mabel, and it is not a fact to be discovered, but a way of living to be earned. How do you love a world that does not last? How do you give your whole heart to a summer you know is ending? How do you grow up without the growing up killing the best thing about you? Those are the real questions, and it is Mabel, not Dipper, who lives out the answer. There is a reading of the show's structure that makes this even clearer, and it is that Dipper's plot is the mystery box, the journals and Bill and the portal and the author, all the stuff that makes it a puzzle. But Mabel's plot is the heart, the stuff that makes the story matter. And when you get to the end, the mystery box empties out. The mysteries are solved, Bill is beaten, the questions are answered, and none of that is what you remember. What you remember is two kids on a bus, a little older, a little sadder, a lot closer, carrying a pig and a scrapbook home from the best summer of their lives. The plot was Dipper's, the meaning was always Mabel's. It is a mystery on its surface and a coming-of-age story in its bones, and the person who carries the bones is her. I want to be careful not to make this sound tidier than it is, though, because the show earns its sweetness by not cheating on the sadness. Mabel does not get everything. The summer really is over. Gravity Falls really does get left behind. The twins really are 13 now, on the far side of childhood, and there is no going back to who they were in June. The bittersweet is real, and the story sits in it. Lets the goodbye be a goodbye. But the difference, the whole difference, is that Mabel can now hold the sweet and the bitter at the same time without being torn apart by it. At the start of the summer, she could only hold the sweet, which is why the bitter, when it came, nearly destroyed her and the world. At the end, she can hold both. She can be sad the summer is ending and grateful it happened, in the same breath, without needing to freeze one or deny the other. That capacity, to hold joy and loss together, to love something fully and let it go anyway, is maybe the most grown-up thing a person can learn, and a 13-year-old on a bus with a pig has just learned it. So let me pull back now from the story itself and ask why this particular arc, carried by this particular girl, seems to reach so far past a kid's cartoon and land on so many grown adults who did not expect to be moved by it. The obvious answer is nostalgia, but I want to be more precise than that, because nostalgia is doing something specific here, and it is worth naming. Gravity Falls is set over a single summer, and summer, especially childhood summer, is the tightest symbol we have for the whole shape of a life. It has a clear beginning and a clear, dreaded end. It is finite, and everyone in it knows it is finite, and that knowledge is part of what makes it feel so golden while it lasts. A childhood summer is a life in miniature. It starts, it swells with possibility, it reaches a peak where you almost forget it will end, and then it ends anyway, right on schedule, no matter how much you loved it. And Mabel's fear of the summer ending is, whether she knows it or not, the fear of life ending, the fear of mortality itself, scaled down to a size a 12-year-old can hold. When she begs for the summer to stay, every adult watching hears the thing underneath it, which is the wish that none of it would ever end, that the people we love would stay, that time would stop taking things. That is why grown people cry at a cartoon about a girl and her pig. She is saying the thing we all stopped letting ourselves say out loud somewhere around the age of 13. And that is the cruel little joke the series plays, gently, on all of us. The age at which Mabel is forced to grow up, 13, is roughly the age at which most of us learn to stop being like Mabel. It is the age where the sincerity gets embarrassing, where the crafts get put away, where you learn to armor your enthusiasm and edit your hope, and pretend you do not care about things so that no one can hurt you for caring. Watching Mabel is, for a lot of adults, like looking at a photograph of a self you traded away. She is what we were before we got careful. And the show's refusal to make her grow out of that, its insistence that she can grow up and stay open, plays like a kind of permission, or maybe an accusation. It suggests that the trade we all made, the openness for the safety, might not have been necessary, that you could have kept the sincerity and just added the wisdom, that the glitter did not have to go. There is a real psychological literature underneath this, and I will keep it loose because the specific labels people hang on Mabel come from fan analysis rather than anything clinical, but the broad strokes are well established outside the series. The trait the personality writers keep flagging in her, that very high openness to experience, is reliably associated with things like creativity, curiosity, aesthetic sensitivity, and emotional richness. And the optimism is not just a mood either. There is a large body of research suggesting that dispositional optimism, the tendency to expect good outcomes, actually functions as a buffer against stress. That optimists tend to cope better, to persist longer, to recover faster, not because their lives are easier, but because their stance toward difficulty is different. The way the series has Mabel handle pain, by making something, by making a joke, by reaching for the people she loves, lines up almost exactly with what the research would call adaptive coping, the healthy strategies, the ones that actually work. Which means that under all the sparkle, Mabel is modeling something real and useful about how to survive being a person. Her way of being is not just charming, it is, in a measurable sense, resilient. But I do not want to reduce her to a psychology profile, because it is doing something the research cannot, which is making an argument about values, not just about coping. It is not merely saying that optimism is a useful stress management technique. It is saying that Mabel's way of seeing the world is, in some deep way, more correct than the cynical alternative, that the sincere person has understood something the ironic person has missed. And this is where I think the show is quietly brave, because sincerity is out of fashion and irony is easy. And the easy, cool, defensible position is always the detached one, the one that keeps everything at arm's length so nothing can wound you. Mabel is the opposite of cool. She is defenseless on purpose. And the series stakes its whole heart on the claim that her defenselessness is not naive, that it is actually a kind of courage, maybe the highest kind, the courage to keep loving things you know you will lose. That claim runs directly against the philosophy the show gives to its villain, and against a certain flavor of clever, detached, everything is meaningless posture that a lot of smart people mistake for sophistication. And I think the reason Mabel lands so hard on adults specifically is that adults are exactly the ones who have been most tempted by that posture. Children are naturally sincere. It is adults who have learned to be ironic, to protect themselves with detachment, to treat caring as embarrassing and hope as naive. And so when a children's cartoon looks a grown-up dead in the eye and insists, through this ridiculous, glittery, wholehearted girl, that the sincere way was right all along, that loving things openly despite their impermanence is wiser than holding them at a distance, it hits a nerve that most adult media is too cool to go near. It tells you that the thing you gave up to feel grown up and safe was not maturity, it was just fear, and that the genuinely mature move, the actually grown-up thing, is to be as open as Mabel while knowing everything she had to learn about loss. There is also the coming-of-age dimension, the reason this show in particular haunts the exact demographic that grew up with it. Gravity Falls arrived when a certain generation was itself right around that threshold, the end of childhood, the beginning of the self-consciousness. So the series was not just about growing up, it was watched during growing up, which fused the two in a way that makes the nostalgia almost unbearably potent. A whole cohort of people were saying goodbye to their own childhoods at the same time they watched Dipper and Mabel say goodbye to theirs. And now, years later, those same people are adults, looking back at it the way you look back at an old summer, which means the act of rewatching Gravity Falls is itself a Mabel experience. It is nostalgia for a story about nostalgia, remembering a show about the pain of remembering. The thing folds in on itself perfectly. When you rewatch it as an adult and feel that ache, you are doing exactly what the Scrapbook does, reaching back into a past that is gone and pulling the love out of it, keeping the moment even though the moment ended. You are proving Mabel's whole philosophy just by missing the show. So that is why she reaches so far. She is not really a character about being 12. She is a character about the one problem that never stops being everyone's problem, no matter how old you get, which is how to love a life that ends. Every adult is Mabel on the bus, carrying a scrapbook out of a summer that is over, trying to figure out how to be grateful and heartbroken at the same time. She just happens to be figuring it out at 13, out loud, in a hand-knit sweater, so that the rest of us can watch someone brave do it first. And that brings me, finally, to the thing I actually want to leave you with tonight, which is not a plot point or an episode, but the philosophy itself, gathered up and stated plainly, the way you might hand someone something to carry home. Before I gather it, though, there is one strand I have been circling all night without quite landing on, and it deserves its own moment, because it is the part of Mabel that looks the flimsiest and is, I think, secretly the gravest. It is the fun, the sheer, relentless, committed pursuit of delight. Mabel wants to have fun the way other people want to be right, and it is easy to read that as childishness, as the least philosophical thing about her. But I have come to think her insistence on joy is a discipline, a practice, maybe even a form of resistance, and that treating it as frivolous is the mistake the show is specifically built to correct. Here is what I mean. There is a version of taking life seriously that consists of taking everything heavily, treating gravity as the only honest emotion, assuming that the deep person is the sad person, and that joy is a kind of surface you have to get past to reach the truth. A lot of clever people believe some version of this, that seriousness and sorrow are more real than delight, that to be truly awake to how things are is to be a little bit grim. And Mabel is a standing argument against that whole outlook. She is fully awake to how things are. She feels the impermanence, the fear, the loss, more than anyone. She is not delighted because she is shallow. She is delighted because she has decided that delight is the correct response to being alive in a world this strange and this brief. And that decision, made in full knowledge of the darkness, is not naivety. It is a kind of defiance. It is choosing to celebrate a party you know is ending, which is braver than refusing to enjoy it because it will end. Watch what she actually does with the ordinary moments, the ones with no plot in them. She turns waiting into a game, turns a boring afternoon into a craft, turns a car ride into a song, turns her pig into a companion she has whole conversations with. She is constantly, actively manufacturing joy out of raw material that most people would let pass as dead time. And this is a skill, not a temperament. It is something she does, on purpose, over and over, a muscle she has built. The people around her tend to wait for good things to happen to them. Mabel makes good things happen, small ones, constantly, because she has understood at some level that if you wait for the world to hand you enough delight, you will wait forever, and that the alternative is to become a person who generates it, who brings the party, rather than hoping to be invited to one. That is closer to a spiritual practice than to a personality trait. It is the daily, deliberate work of refusing to let the ordinary go to waste. And there is a moral edge to it too, because her joy is almost never solitary. She does not manufacture delight just for herself. She makes things to give away. She throws parties so other people can have fun. Her happiness is contagious by design, aimed outward, a gift she is constantly trying to hand to everyone in range, which means her pursuit of fun is really another face of her love-first ethic. To Mabel, making joy and making love are nearly the same activity, because the whole point of the joy is to share it, to pull the people she cares about into a brighter place with her. When she is at her best, she is not just a happy person. She is a happiness engine for everyone around her, and that is a genuinely rare and valuable thing to be. The friend who makes the room lighter just by being in it. The one who reminds everyone else that it is allowed to enjoy things. The show does test this, of course, because it tests everything about her. The shadow of joy-seeking is escapism, the retreat into fun as a way of avoiding what is hard, and we watch that shadow swallow the world when her need for the endless party curdled into the endless prison. So the delight is not innocent. It has a dark twin, the fantasy that never ends. But the corrected version of Mabel, the one who walks off the bus at the end, has learned the difference between joy that faces reality and joy that flees it. Real joy, the kind she keeps, is the kind you feel while knowing the party ends. That does not require pretending otherwise. That is made sweeter and not poisoned by the awareness of the ending. Fake joy, the kind she gives up, is the kind that needs the ending erased, the kind that can only exist inside a lie. Same delight, and once again, everything depends on whether it is pointed at the real world or away from it. Her whole arc, in the end, is one long lesson in aiming the biggest things about herself, her love, her hope, her joy, at what is actually there, instead of at what she wishes were there. So let me finally gather the whole thing up. The philosophy of Mabel Pines, stated plainly, goes something like this. Meet the world expecting the best of it, not because the best is guaranteed, but because hope keeps the door open long enough for good things to walk through, and despair slams it shut before they can. Run everything you do through love. Ask what the kindest thing would be, and do that. Pour yourself into the people around you without holding back a reserve for safety. Be yourself completely, sincerely, without the armor of coolness or irony, and accept that being sincere means being occasionally ridiculous, because to armor up is to shrink yourself down to a size that can never be laughed at and never be fully alive either. Make joy, do not wait for it. Treasure the small good moments, keep the scrapbook, mark the days, because the love inside a moment is real forever even after the moment ends. And this is the part she has to learn the hardest way anyone in the series learns anything. Do not try to freeze the good thing to keep it. You cannot. The attempt to stop time is not love, it is fear wearing love's clothes, and it will build you a prison and call it paradise. Real love is the willingness to let the moment go while carrying its meaning with you, to accept the ending as the price of having had the thing at all. What makes this a real philosophy and not just a nice attitude is that the story puts it through fire, and it comes out changed but intact. This is the thing I keep wanting to underline. Mabel's worldview is not simply endorsed, it is tested to destruction and rebuilt. The naive version, the version that says everything will be fine and nothing good has to end, is not just questioned, it literally ends the world. The show is merciless about that. It refuses to let sunny optimism off the hook, refuses to pretend that a good heart is automatically a wise one, refuses to let Mabel's love be innocent of the harm it can do. And then, having broken her creed down to its foundations, it builds it back up into something sturdier. An optimism that has looked at loss and stayed hopeful anyway. A love that has learned to include endings. A joy that does not need reality erased in order to exist. That is not the philosophy she started with. It is the philosophy she earned, and the difference between the two is the whole point. And I think the reason it works, the reason it does not collapse into a greeting card, is that the story is scrupulously honest about the cost. It never tells you that if you just stay positive, everything will be okay. It tells you the opposite. It tells you that things end, that you will lose what you love, that the summer is really over, and there is no getting it back, that growing up is a real loss, and not just a fake obstacle to be overcome. It gives the sadness its full weight, and only then, having refused to lie about how hard it is, does it offer the consolation, which is not that the loss is not real, but that the love survives it. That ending is not the same as never having been, that you can carry the whole thing forward inside you, even as it passes out of your hands. That is a consolation you can actually trust, because it does not require you to pretend. It is the only kind of comfort that holds up at 3 in the morning, the kind that agrees with you about how much it hurts, and then tells you the love was real anyway, and is yours to keep. There is a beautiful symmetry in the fact that the series gives this, its deepest and most adult idea, to its youngest and most childlike character. Because the lesson is really about how to hold childhood and adulthood at the same time, how to grow up without going cold, and who better to teach it than the girl who does exactly that in front of you, who crosses from 12 to 13, from the frozen summer fantasy to the accepted future, and arrives on the other side still herself, still glittering, still loving out loud, but now with the wisdom folded in. Mabel is proof of the thing she is teaching. She is what it looks like to grow up and keep the good part. And in a culture that so often presents maturity as a matter of subtraction, of becoming quieter and harder and more guarded, she stands there at the summer's close as a quiet argument that the real maturity is addition, that you get to keep the openness and add the wisdom, that the sweater does not have to come off. So if there is a single thing to carry home from all of this, from the sweaters and the pig, and the rift and the scrapbook and the bus pulling out of Gravity Falls, I think it is this. The people who love the world most are the ones who feel its endings most sharply. And that is not a flaw in them. It is the price of loving it that much, and it is worth paying. Mabel feels the summer ending harder than anyone because she loved the summer more than anyone. And the answer is not to love it less so the ending hurts less. The answer is to love it all the way, knowing it will end, and then to let it end, and then to keep it in the only way anything can really be kept, which is in memory, in love, in the scrapbook of who you became because of it. That is what she learns. That is what she is. A girl who loved a summer so much she nearly broke the world to keep it, and who grew, in the end, into someone who could love it that much and still let it go. And honestly, most of us spend our whole lives trying to learn what a 13-year-old with braces and a pet pig figured out on a bus ride home. So maybe it is worth staying up late with her once in a while, and letting her teach it again. There is one more place her philosophy shows itself that I do not want to leave out, because it is where all the abstract ideas become ordinary and daily and small, and that is in how she treats the people who are not her family, her friends, because it is one thing to love your twin, who is bound to you by blood and by 12 years of shared life. It is another thing to love strangers with the same intensity, and Mabel does. Watch how fast she collects people. She arrives in a town where she knows no one, and within what feels like days, she has gathered Grenda and Candy, two girls as sincere and weird and uncool as she is, and she loves them with a completeness that most people reserve for family they have known forever. There is no audition, no probation period, no holding back until they prove themselves. Mabel decides you are wonderful and then treats you as wonderful, and the treating tends to make it true. That is a real ethical stance, even if she would never call it that. It is the decision to extend the full force of your love to people who have not earned it yet, on the bet that loving them is how they get earned. The clearest single example is a girl who starts out as her opposite, Pacifica, the rich girl, the town's inherited royalty, raised to be cruel and cold and superior, taught by her family that some people simply matter more than others. And the town's story with Pacifica, especially in the episode set in the Northwest Mansion, is about kindness breaking inherited cruelty, about a child raised to be awful getting the chance to choose to be better than the people who made her. Mabel is not the center of that episode, That is more Dipper's thread. But the ethic driving the whole thing is pure Mabel, the belief that no one is fixed, that a cold heart is usually a hurt heart, that meanness is learned and can therefore be unlearned if someone is willing to offer warmth instead of matching the coldness. And in one of the later stories, told in one of the books rather than the show itself, Mabel knits Pacifica a sweater, which is about the most Mabel gesture imaginable, taking the girl who was raised to look down on her and handing her a piece of that handmade love, folding a former enemy into the circle of people she makes things for. That is her whole philosophy in a single object. You defeat cruelty not by beating it but by refusing to answer it in kind, by being so stubbornly warm that the coldness has nowhere to land. And then, of course, there is Waddles, and I have saved him for near the end on purpose, because the pig is where her love is at its purest and least explicable. Because you can rationalize loving your twin, and you can rationalize loving your friends, but why does she love the pig so much? He does nothing. He cannot talk, cannot help her, cannot reciprocate in any way a cynic would count. By every practical measure, Waddles is useless. And that is exactly why he matters so much to who she is, because Mabel's love has never been about what something can do for her. She wanted him the instant she saw him, completely, for no reason except that her heart went out to him, and she has never once wavered or asked what she gets in return. Waddles is love with the transaction removed, love as pure gift, love that expects nothing back and is not diminished in the slightest by getting nothing back. In a show full of characters who deal and bargain and calculate what everything is worth, a con man uncle, a demon who trades in handshakes, a genius who bartered his mind for knowledge, Mabel loves a pig for free. And the story, tellingly, rewards her for it. She gets to keep him. Of everything she has to let go of when the summer closes, the one thing she loved most uselessly and most unconditionally is the one thing she gets to carry home. The show is making a quiet promise there, that the love you give without keeping score is the love that comes back to you. That, in the end, is the texture of her philosophy at ground level, underneath all the big ideas about time and change and mortality. It is just this, over and over, in small, ordinary acts. Decide people are worth loving before they prove it. Answer coldness with warmth. Make things and give them away. Love the useless thing completely, for free, because loving it is its own reward. None of that is complicated, and none of it requires being 12, or being in a magic town, or facing down a triangle at the end of the world. It is available to anyone, on any ordinary Tuesday, and that availability is the whole gift of her. Mabel's wisdom is not locked behind an apocalypse. The apocalypse just proved it. The wisdom itself is the kind of thing you could start doing tomorrow, if you were brave enough to be that open, that sincere, that unguarded with your own heart. And watching her makes you feel, for a little while, like maybe you could be. It is strange and a little wonderful when you sit back from it, that a show which ran for only 2 seasons, 40 episodes across a couple of summers on a children's network, ended cleanly in the winter of 2016, has kept this hold on people for so long after. Gravity Falls could have been remembered as a clever mystery box, all ciphers and secret journals, and a fandom decoding hidden messages in the credits. And some of that is exactly how it is remembered, the puzzle show, the one where everything meant something. But I do not think the ciphers are why anyone stays. I think people stay for the feeling, for 2 kids who grew up over one summer and made the growing up look survivable. And I think a surprising amount of that weight rests on the sister, the one who was supposed to be the comic relief. Alex Hirsch built the whole thing as a kind of monument to his own childhood summers with his own twin, and what he made turned out to be a monument to everybody's, a place people go back to, the way you go back to a photograph of a year you cannot return to feel the ache and be grateful for it at the same time. And there is something deeply Mabel about the show's afterlife, because returning to it is itself an act of the exact kind of love she spends the whole series learning how to give. You cannot go back to Gravity Falls. The summer is over, the twins went home, the story is finished and closed, and no amount of wanting will start it again. But you can keep it. You can carry it forward. You can put it on late at night and let it remind you of who you were when you first watched it, and of everyone you have loved and lost since, and of the strange fact that the losing does not erase the having. She would tell you that is not sad, or not only sad. She would tell you it means you loved it, and that the love is still real, still yours, still glittering somewhere inside you like a shooting star on a hand-knit sweater. That is the whole philosophy of Mabel Pines, and it is a good thing to fall asleep holding. So wherever you are right now, with the lights low and the night quiet around you, I hope